Hey, what's up, everyone, and welcome back to another episode here with Matthew Lestalia, me, your host. I am so happy to come to you guys today with this episode because we're going to discuss something that really plagues everyone within the professional domain. Doesn't matter your industry, doesn't matter your profession. This hits everybody, and it is going to be extremely impactful for both the first line supervisor, for the employee, for the CEO, for everyone that participates in the workforce. This is going to be crucial because it's something that we all deal with, it's something that we all dread, and it's something that frankly all of us can do a bit better job at. So, we're going to discuss how to improve performance reviews, right? The thing, the mechanism that is present for us to evaluate or to present the evaluations of somebody's performance, right? So that they can improve. We're going to look at how to improve that so that those performance reviews can end up doing two things. They can stop being this moment of dread in the eyes of your employees and your talent and your workforce. They cannot be a dread for you if you are not a particular fan of being a bearer of potentially bad news. Some of us out there like that or enjoy that. So take that for what it's worth. But I think for the vast majority of us, we don't like delivering bad news. We don't like telling people that they are not doing well. It can be uncomfortable. And so there are ways and there are strategies that you can take, especially today, where this is even more important because of the hybrid workspace that we're all managing. How do you not only improve just generally your performance reviews and how you do that, but also how do you do that for people that are spending less, if not no time in the office, right? It's becoming more and more prevalent. It has hit a point of mass adoption, and it doesn't look like it's going to be ebbing anytime soon. If anything, I think the adoption is going to continue to spread. I don't know. Let me know what you guys think. But before we do, I should give you a little bit of background on me for those of you that are brand new to this show. Like I said, my name's Matthew Lestalia. I spent about 12 years in the Army, of which I had the opportunity to learn a lot about leadership, a lot about how to motivate people, and how, especially in situations where the task at hand was not intrinsically inspiring or fulfilling. They're taking all of the stuff out of large metal containers, these connexes, taking it all out, and then reorganizing it, getting rid of the trash, getting rid of broken equipment, putting it back in and organizing it is not in and of itself intrinsically satisfying. But there are strategies that you can take in order to increase this, to get the best performance out of your people without just grinding them into the ground because I'm going to use my authoritative position and you have to do this because I said that you have to do it, right? That works temporarily in the short term, but if you're looking to create an environment that is conducive, that is magnetic to people, that people are leaving their current organizations to come to you, that will not quit your workforce, right? Creating this won't quit workforce. That is the goal. That is why I do what I do, and that is the entire purpose of my working with businesses and collaborating with businesses, is to help them find talent, attract that talent, and to retain that talent, especially in the face of the Great Resignation, which has been hitting the United States particularly hard for really about 2 years, but in particular for the last 7-8 months, we have been just sitting really high, like somewhere around 4.5 million people quitting their jobs every month, and that's consistent for the last 7-8 months. And the interesting piece is that the unemployment rate isn't going up. As a matter of fact, if anything, it's going down, which is a sign that people aren't just quitting and not going back to work. They are quitting because they are finding different and better opportunities for themselves elsewhere. This passion to help businesses do this was really spurred from my own background of working with individuals and in the Army, and working with resilience and mindset and how to overcome kind of mental obstacles and self-imposed obstacles, how to leverage your network and your team, how to be there for others, and all of these things in a very operational kind of way, not in the highfalutin kind of woo-woo stuff, but really, really operational, really stuff that makes an impact and a difference in people's lives, in their day-to-day struggles. This work that I was able to do really inspired me, drove me to want to do that full time instead of doing the Army full time, right? Because when I had the opportunity to do that in the Army, it was what they call an additional duty. It was an extra hat I got to wear, and I really enjoyed it so much that I wanted to take it full time. And I saw that there were a lot of improvements that needed to be made, fine tuning and really, the goal with the Army is to create something that is, you pull it out of the box wherever you go, and anyone that's trained on how to use this can use it anywhere for any group. I wanted to do one better. I wanted to get specific. I wanted to get detailed. And so I did. I spent a lot of time researching different resilience strategies and retreats and the scientific literature. And as I waded through this material, I had this kind of realization. And it was, I want to have the most meaningful impact for people that I possibly can. And as important as it is to instill resilience in mindset and in your emotional well-being, I thought that getting more specific and thinking about where we spend most of our time and how we can use these types of skills to promote that wellness, to promote that resilience in this area. And when we think about it, most of our waking hours are spent at work. It's not at home, and it's definitely not leisure time at home, enjoying time with your family and loved ones. Because when you're at home, you're probably playing a lot of catch up. You're probably doing dishes, doing laundry, cooking. There's a lot of housekeeping tasks that need to be done. And so if you factor all those in, you're probably spending a couple of hours of quality time with your family. So looking there wasn't of particular interest to me, but looking at work, because work is there's so much writing on it. You have your paycheck is writing on it. You have your feeling of status, a sense of belonging or not. A lot of stress just from projects and due dates and all of these things and expectations and output. There's a lot of stress there. And so I really wanted to take these tools and these ideas and use it to help people in the workplace. And it ended up occurring to me that, well, I can do this from a two-pronged approach. I can look at this from the employee perspective and say, these are the tools that you can use while you're in the workplace to increase those things, to become more resilient, to be able to see an opportunity out of an obstacle that is coming up at work. When you have a stressful event, how to be best prepared for those unexpected events, by creating a proper structure in your life and the way that you kind of go about your life. And then once those things come up, how to effectively manage and handle those things so that you're not just getting past it and forgetting about it, but you're actually using it to make yourself better in the future. So there's that side. And then I thought, well, why couldn't I work with the businesses themselves and have, not just work with one side that's almost there can be a sense of them fighting against the workplace, like, oh, I have to use these resilience tools and strategies in order to combat the effects of work. Like, well, why not change the dynamic at work? Why not change the way that things are happening there, or at least introduce ideas that could be useful and helpful, so that way the company, the organization, and the leadership are investing in that same outcome, in a higher level of resilience, higher level of motivation, a higher level of output. Really, at the end of the day, you want your employees to come to work and to perform, and you want them to do that day after day and month after month and year after year. It would be most ideal that you're not churning through employees and hoping to keep a constant feed of people coming in from the outside that you have to train and bring up to speed on how you do your stuff and how your proprietary equipment and software and all that works. So that's where all of this came from. Essentially, was this two-pronged approach coming from the talent side and coming from the management side. And if I could bring these two together and I could provide strategies to help both, then what's the outcome? Then there's a win for the organization, right? They have an employee who comes to work that is more motivated, that can overcome obstacles, that can think on their feet, and will perform optimally, if not exceeding the standard, on a regular basis. And they don't have to worry about them quitting and having to find somebody to replace them, which, like I said, 4.53 million people quitting their jobs. That's a lot of people dealing with a lot of quits. So, and then you think about it from the talent side. When they go home and they're feeling these things, and they've gotten that sense of accomplishment, they were able to attain a feeling of safety and security in their income and their employment. They're able to gain a sense of fulfillment from the work that they're doing, even if the work is not intrinsically fulfilling in and of itself. And they hopefully, if you're able to take some of these strategies, you can create a sense of belonging, a sense of almost love and community within the workplace, where you really look out for each other and you really care for each other, because you're looking at each other as people. Because at the end of the day, that's what this is. It's just people working with people. Some people have been there for longer. They know how it works, and they run the shifts. That's essentially how it works. So if you're able to provide that for the talent, and when the talent has that and they get that sense of belonging, then they're able to come home with a greater sense of satisfaction, a greater sense of fulfillment. And think about the difference of that. If you're not somebody who's coming home after 8, 10, 12 hours of work, and they don't feel that their work is fulfilling, they don't believe that they're making much of a difference, but hey, they're earning a paycheck, right? When you look at Maslow's hierarchy of needs, that's essentially kind of what this is hitting at. They have safety and security. They're safe in their person, in the sense that they're not worried about missing food, water, and shelter, right? And then the physiological needs, the baseline. Second level is looking at that actual security, and that comes kind of in two ways. Like, there's a security in employment and a security in your person, right? So the feeling secure in what you can provide in the employment, then, and they don't have to worry about being fired if they make a mistake. That's very helpful. It helps them to be able to focus on the next step and the next need, which you can also provide to them by taking positive and proactive steps and actions. And that's a sense of belonging. And that's where I think we are missing the boat. A lot of us are missing the boat, and that's where the biggest change can be found, is in that third rung, that third step of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And so what I do is come in every week and I discuss different strategies and ways to help get that third rung, and potentially open the door to the fourth and fifth. But for today, I guess, and for today, well, because what but deletes everything before it, right? When you say that, so maybe that's a nice segue into this. So if you're in a performance review, if you are telling your subordinate, hey, listen, you're doing great. I really appreciate that you show up to work on time and that you're ready and you're motivated to go to work, but your output is not very good and the quality of your work is needs drastic improvement, right? Essentially everything you said before the butt gets erased mentally in their mind. Not literally. Obviously they'll remember it, but it does essentially put a highlighter on the last part and really kind of shades out the first. It's hard to remember and to focus on those good things. So it is our job. It is the leader's job. It is your job, leaders out there, first line supervisors, anybody who's providing performance reviews. This is part of your job, and that's just a fun little segue into it. There was actually what I wanted to talk about today was that there was an article that was written. Oh, I don't have the date, but it was in The Conversation, this journal called The Conversation, and it's about improving performance reviews. And so I wanted to talk about the strategies they talk about where they got it right, where they got it wrong, and what you can do from there. So basically they broke this down into 3 different categories, kind of 3 different steps. I've added my own at the end because I don't think that they hit everything just right, but we'll get to that. So stick around to the end. You'll get my tidbit from my own experience. But for now, let's go ahead and move into it. So step 1 or the first part of improving performance reviews is to bridge the gap, bridge the familiarity gap, right? When we think about, especially like I said, a lot of this, when I'm speaking about this, I definitely want to make sure that we're considering both ends of the hybrid environment. If we're thinking about the people who are in the office every day, and you're also thinking about the people who are working remotely. You don't want to leave them out. That can create a lot of resentment, and that is how resentment brews, and what you can do to get in front of that, and how you can help people to overcome it is going to be a whole nother episode probably coming up in the next couple of weeks, because that can be a very big deal, especially when it's always a big deal at work, when people are getting promoted and other people aren't. People are developing relationships with leadership and other people aren't. And that just becomes highlighted significantly with the hybrid work model. So bridging that familiarity gap, frequent check-ins, right? And so think about this again from a remote employee's point of view. If you have somebody that's coming in maybe once a week, or it doesn't really come in at all, maybe they're completely remotely located and so they don't come in at all. That was my case. My first job outside of the Army was working remote for a company that was in London. The only other person in the United States was near Boston, and I was in Virginia. And so I literally never met him. We planned on it a couple of times, but it never ended up happening before I left. So I got to experience this full on. And one of the beautiful things, my boss, essentially the president of sales, he ran a really tight ship, but he also ran a very like a personally connected ship. He was open to change. He had a very open dialogue. We would talk at least once a week, where the primary, that's not even right. Where like there was no work focus to the talk. It was just like, hey, how you doing? What's going on? And like we got to know each other very well. We got to know each other's politics, which was fun because we were not we were not looking at things from the same angle on a lot of things, but don't worry about it. We're not going to dive into that here. This is not a political show. But yeah, so he was really good at connecting and doing the interpersonal stuff that a lot of people are missing. And that was, and he took proactive steps to ensure that there was a connection there because he knew that was important. And so doing these check-ins and even making sure that like within your calendar, like schedule it in. If you're the supervisor and you're doing these reviews, you're doing the performance reviews, you don't want the performance review to come as a surprise that it is coming. They should know because it happens every year. But you also don't want the information that's coming in the performance review to be a surprise. And doing these kind of check-ins does two things. It allows you to connect, to work on the interpersonal stuff, and it also allows you to make observations about work and ask them how they feel things are going. Now, all of this is predicated. I'm going to be, because I can't get out of my own way. I'm going to be touching on some of the stuff that in my fourth point throughout here, because my idea kind of stems or branches through all of these. So one of the things you have to make sure to do if you want your performance reviews to go absolutely and most impeccably well and have it be no surprise as to what the review is going to be, is that you have to do an initial counseling, and the counseling has to be rooted on that assessment, right? And really the assessment and the initial counseling need to be based on the actual job and the expectations that the person's going to be doing, and what is the expected output, what is the expected performance, and laying these things out very clear. It should be very much like a rubric that you are providing for them. You don't want to keep, this isn't school, right? You don't want to keep the answers to the test hidden and have them do their best to figure it out. Give them the answers, and like, you do this. This is meeting the standard. You do this, it's exceeding the standard. If you only do this, this is not meeting the standard. And it should be as clear as that. And if you have things within, and we'll actually get to this in the next step. So actually, hold off on that. Mental pause. So here's another strategy for bridging, for the familiarity gap, for bridging this gap. Create office hours where managers are available. Right. So think about this like, I get, if you guys have been to college, or even, I don't know if they do this in high school now, but they in college they'll have the professors will hold office hours, and they'll say, hey, on Tuesdays and Fridays from 12 to 2, my door's open, and this is the time for you to come in and bring in your questions and talk or chat about anything. Now, you could do this during lunch times in your work. You can say, hey, during lunch, like my door's open during lunch, or I'm going to take these people out to lunch, I'm going to socialize. And if there's, again, look, not forgetting the remote people, create a digital one, do this. And this is your job. You're the leader. You have to lead. You got to actually do this stuff. And so, sometimes it may not work for you to do it during business hours. Make yourself available afterwards. That comes with the territory of leadership. And if you're saying, oh no, there's no way I'm going to do that, I'm not letting them cut into my family time, like, okay, like that's fine. But if you're not able to make that time in during the day, and to actually schedule that in to make sure that you're available, and if you're not doing the check-ins with them, like we said in the first one, frequent short check-ins, then don't be surprised when your team, your squad is getting hit by this great resignation that's sweeping through America. The other one is, they talked about, this is again from the article though. So these three are from the article of within the familiarity gap. They talked about happy hours, Zoom happy hours, and that you should be hosting them and you should be making them fulfilling and all of this stuff. And I think that's good. I think it's important to team cohesion. I also think it's important to do, if you're going to do it and you're in your organization has the ability to do this, where they have the flexibility where you can say, hey, listen, from 3 to 4 on Friday, or from 12 to 2 on Friday, we're going to do the Zoom happy hour. But you want people to connect. You want to take steps to actually make sure that it's not just something that people, it's like, man, in the army what we would call it is mandatory fun. So I haven't worked in the civilian sector long enough to know if that term either came from there or has spread to there, but it is it is apt, right? And so we had those actually with the company that I was working for out of London, and it was interesting because it there was, for me, there's a level of, there's like a moment where I could flip a switch where it's like, okay, I'm just gonna be here and whatever, like I'll speak when I have to speak, but I'm not really engaged. And there were other times where I'm like, they're playing around and having fun banter and stuff like that. And so having, being aware of this fact, being aware that, not all things fit all people. We would do games. We'd play, we'd provide pictures that each person would have to, send in, or, a different kind of trivia stuff. But, you just got to figure out what your team enjoys. And one of the things that I thought was really interesting in this is that some supervisors were out there, and they were communicating with their team and figuring out what kind of desserts they liked, or what kind of treats they liked, or whatever. What kind, if their whole team enjoyed alcoholic beverages, and they figured that out, and they would even send packages out to the team members to be able to enjoy and participate in that Zoom meeting, right? And so that's kind of like breaking that digital wall, because it's almost like I'm bringing part of this Zoom party into reality, into your reality. It's in front of you. So now if maybe we're doing a wine tasting thing, and like, okay, well, we were able to deliver 4 bottles of wine to each of these people on the team. And now we're all get to taste it and have these sips and discuss it and enjoy, and there's ways to kind of bridge that gap. And that's, again, going into full detail on all the different ways you can do that. That's going to be a total on episode as well. So look forward to that. If this shoe fits, if you're in that type of organization. I know a lot of the companies I work with that are in my area specifically are more on the manufacturing side. And so a lot of the virtual stuff doesn't necessarily hit. Excuse me. But there are a lot of digital companies out there where this is very, very apt. Okay, so we kind of alluded to this earlier. Moving into step 2 of what this article from the conversation said, it was fewer observations, which can be counterintuitive, right? The whole purpose of this is that we want to improve our performance reviews. Well, what they're saying essentially is that we're using too many subjective criteria to create a performance review. That we're looking at things like creativity and other aspects that are very hard to objectively rate and give examples of without having a clear definition. Let's see. They actually provided a good transformation of creativity to something that actually could be measured, and it generates practical ideas in novel situations. Now, again, this is still kind of hard because you would, in order to truly objectively do this, is that you would have to know how many novel situations arose for this person and what their ideas were and what, how practical were they. But it is better, right? It's a step in the right direction. And so if creativeness is something that you are looking to measure, look to transition it to something like that. And so take that same idea and transfer it across all domains. So if you have anything that's like that is some sort of character-based trait that you're trying to assess and do a performance review on, change it into an action step, right? Generates practical ideas. in novel situations. So it gives the action and the setting for it. So use that as kind of a basis. Provide an action for them to have done and a setting for them to be able to do it. And that provides you with something that you could reference. Like, oh, okay, well, we had 4 meetings this past month, once a week, and during those meetings, you provided this many ideas. I remember in this meeting you provided 3, you provided 4, whatever. But you have metrics, right? And so then again, your responsibility as that first line supervisor, as that manager, is to really be aware of this and to not shoot from the hip. And if you're trying, this is going back to my fourth one, that is, like I said, that branches out. My point, that these branch out in between all of these, is that you cannot, I don't care how good you are, if you wait a year so you do your initial, let's say you follow the guidance, right? And you gave a really solid initial counseling and initial expectation and performance expectation counseling session. And then a year rolls around and you even use great action and setting based criteria to evaluate them. How effectively are you going to remember all that stuff over a year? Think about 3 weeks after they started working, and then you go, what, 50, how many weeks are in a year? 50, 56, 52. And you're end up with 49 weeks of time in between when those things happened and when the evaluation's being done, and what mechanisms do you have in place to ensure that you're actually keeping track of these things. But the more easily trackable they are, the more results based they are, the easier they are to track. But it's your job to make sure that you're actually keeping track, and then you can provide that review with a lot more accuracy and with proof to back it up, to back up what you're saying. Now, I like this too. Again, this all falls under fewer observations, right? We want to look, like I said, we want to be results based. We want to change it so that our criteria in the evaluation are results based. We also want to ensure that, and the thing is, that really helps too. I never want to forget our remote working friends. Is that really helps too with them, because it lets them know that, in these situations, these are what we're expecting, and so whether you're working from home or you're working in the office, like when a meeting is there, if something that is important for you is to participate in the meeting and provide meaningful feedback or provide new ideas, then I need to let you know that, and you need to know when those opportunities are for you to be able to do so. And so the next thing they said was allow freedom for manner of execution and hold up expectations, right? And so that goes into, right, you have, like I said, you have action, you have setting, but you can go into more detail with other things when you can be more specific. That works. Setting and action work well with when you're transitioning from those personal traits, if you're using those. But if you have, specifics that you're looking for people to perform, like you need to produce this many widgets within this quarter, then you have due dates, right? Like, it's in this quarter, this is the end of the quarter. Make sure that they understand what quarters are and when the expectation is due by. They need to understand the quality of performance, right? Like, this is what it looks like when it's completed correctly. This is what it looks like when it's not. and these are the in between, if there are any, right, wrong, that's it. And then you can exceed standard by doing more than what's expected. Bam. Then you want to make sure, like I said, through this kind of just buttresses exactly everything we've been talking about, which is you want to be transparent. That is one of the key principles that I work with companies on is transparent communication, and there should be very transparent communication in the evaluation process, because the evaluation process really is just a conversation about how they're doing, and there shouldn't be any question from them in how they're doing, because their expectations should have been made very clear. You should be very transparent with the expectations. And so when it comes time and you're like, hey, we needed you to produce 2,500 widgets this year. You produced 2,300. So, hey, you were close, but you didn't hit the mark. And this is the impact of that. And you can let them know that from Jump Street, that like, if you only produce this many, then this is the big picture impact. Like, this is why we put this number on you, and why we put these numbers on everybody, on all of these different individuals, because when you're able to tie people into the kind of big picture stuff and let them know like what this is, why does it matter? I missed it by 200, but I made over 2,000. Like, what's the big difference? Like, well, when we set our goals and our targets, we do that with an idea, with a purpose, right? We're not just one. You could get bonuses, which is good and it's motivating, but you can tie people in with more. You can tie people in even better with benefits. That's one of my biggest pushes. Is yes, you can cut people checks for bonuses for better performance and for meeting their expected output over a period of time consistently, but you can also look at what it is that they are handling and struggling and working with in their own life. Are they a new father, a new mother? Do they just have kids? Like, what would really benefit them? Like, hey, listen, and if you see this kind of as a trend across your team, as across your organization, you can gear performance output with things that matter to them. So, hey, listen, we're actually considering bringing in a daycare service into our facility, so you don't even have to go somewhere else to drop your kids off. When you come in, it's right there. And then that way, on breaks, on lunches, you can go see your kid. Like, isn't that great? That's perfect. And so how much more motivating of a factor is that to perform well than saying, okay, yeah, and here's a check for X percentage, because you did really well. Thanks. Keep it up. Good work. It's just, these are the ways that you could tie people into that performance through understanding where it is that they're coming from. And this is how people can go home feeling motivated and excited. And then there's almost an expectation flip side, right? They hit their marks. There's an expectation like, hey, listen, you said we needed to do this. We did this. Now it's your turn to put up, right? And so it kind of goes back and forth, right? There's this balancing. It's a relationship. So I think that's fun. I think that's really good. And really, we broke in to they kind of overlap here. So they talk about one. See, then this one I don't have a problem with anything they've said so far. The third and final one that this article talks about is one review to rule them all. And it talks about, using one type of system for evaluating all employees and effectively measures the employee performance. We talked about kind of the things that you need to modify or make sure that you're discussing and how you discuss them in your performance review structure in the previous step, and by making them results based. But I don't know, like I'm torn on this, because what they're saying is that this keeps it fair because everyone's evaluated on the same system and on the same evaluation. And I don't know, it really depends on your organization, because if you have an organization that it's pretty horizontal and a lot of people are working on projects and the people can kind of be shifted from team to team to work on different projects, then you could probably do something like that where a lot of the roles are somewhat the same. You think about companies like McKinsey that do consulting, right? You could probably evaluate most of them on almost all the employees there on a very similar type of evaluation system. But even with that, when you look at a company like that, or even take a look at Twitter, right? You have all these different kind of software engineer folks behind the scenes, but they have different responsibilities and different expectations, right? So I think that if you're looking at the the kind of character trait side and you're transitioning that, I think that is really good to keep uniform. But you can't have the same performance review for, you know, somebody who is a technical analyst and somebody who is a content moderator at Twitter. They have different responsibilities, they have different roles, they have different expectations, and so some of the professionalism, some of the performance, some of the interactions and the outputs during meetings and social interactions or professional social interactions like meetings, those could be somewhat the same. You might want to see people bringing up new ideas and offering different solutions. And maybe your big focus is people coming up, idea generation, regardless of your, within your domain, within your section or department. And so that can cross the boundaries of different departments of an organization. So it can work, but you definitely need to. There are going to be specific output that is going to vary and different demands that are going to vary from department to department. So I think general frame can go across, but then gearing it in, because you do want it to be specific. You want them to know that their work and their quality of work is being assessed, and they're not just receiving some sort of generalized assessment that the less applicable they feel it is when you're going through it. It's like, oh yeah, that doesn't really apply, so we're not going to worry about that. But then it's just they don't feel connected to the organization. It's another disconnecting opportunity when you want to reduce as many of those opportunities for disconnecting as possible. Because there are so many companies out there that are just waiting to connect with your talent. So let's nip that in the butt, right? Let's keep our people motivated. Let's keep them satisfied and fulfilled. That was it for the article. That was 100% of what the article had to talk about. What I wanted to add on is, like I had talked about before. So I think that these are the important, really, really important things to understand when it comes to strategies to improve these performance reviews. And like I said, number one is you have to come out of the gate strong with an initial counseling. And really the structure I'm going to be talking about is actually one that the Army uses or are supposed to use. And when it is used, it is incredibly effective. It is so good. Systems are only as good as the people who use them, right? So you can have the best system in the world, but if it kind of gets thrown to the wayside because it's not a priority, then it doesn't really matter how good it is. Same idea as having the best mousetrap in the world, but nobody knows about it, so nobody buys it, right? It has to be adopted. If the system is great and it works, then you have to have people using it. And it is not the case that great systems will just be used because they're so great. Like, no. What is the immediate emergency is typically going to override these things. It's going to override the next things I'm going to talk about. So what I know makes the most significant impact on these annual performance reviews and truly removes the level of anxiety going into them is the following. But real quick, the reason, just to talk about the anxiety real quick, the reason that there's anxiety most of the time isn't because people are afraid of getting a bad review. I mean, yes, it is it, but they're afraid of not knowing. They're going in like, I don't know if this is going to go really good or really bad, but it's this area of ambiguity. We as humans do not like living in uncertain situations. We don't like to be walking on eggshells. We want to feel confident and know and have confidence in what is going on. And that's why everyone wants to be seen and perceived as a person who knows something that you don't know. Because that puts them at this different level, this different footing where they can receive more respect and esteem because they have the information and they know and they're confident about their knowledge of it. So I want your talent to be that confident. I want them to be super confident going into there because they already know what it's going to be. They already know what it's going to be about. And how would they do that? How would, after getting an initial counseling, you laying out the details of exactly their performance, for them, their memory is not perfect either. They're probably not keeping track of how many times that they generated a good new idea in meetings over the past year. So what can we do to create an environment where that is the case? When they do walk in, they're like, I feel pretty good about this. Like I know generally, if not specifically, where I sit. And the answer is simple. Don't wait for the end of the year to do your counselings. It's really that simple. You should have quarterly assessments mixed in with this as well. And you can even do touch points bi-weekly in between these. So monthly, not bi-weekly. I mean, you could do bi-weekly, but you want to do your check-ins, right? So this is not to just to make sure it's clear. The check-ins that we talked about in the beginning and bridging the familiarity gap is done because there's less stress and anxiety between individuals going into a performance review when there's a connection there. And so if you're not doing anything to foster that connection, then that's just another one of those opportunities for disconnect. And like I said, we want to reduce those opportunities. So those are purely opportunities for connection, like I said, with other companies. Now, outside of those familiarity gaps, we're talking about performance quarterly at a minimum. You should be going in with some sort of an outline from that and from both, because these should mirror each other, from the initial counseling and the annual review. Those really shouldn't be that different. It should basically be like, these were the expectations, and then you put that on another sheet. Right next to those expectations is like, this is what you did. And what you do is in between there, and as a part of the initials, that you can talk to the person about their goals. Like, what is your goal? What would you like to achieve? And like, oh, I would like to do this in this quarter. And then you can take that and reflect it in that next quarterly counseling. Then you can do a quick review. Like, hey, listen, this is what we talked about in the beginning. These were the expectations, and this is what we saw. How do you feel about how it went? And then they can tell you, like, oh yeah, I really struggled here, I struggled there. Like, oh, okay, well, I can help you with that, or we can get you retrained on this. But you can address the issues, and you're not waiting for the end of the year. And then you get a chance again to run the test again, and you have another quarter, and they go through. But before you start that quarter upfront, again, you hit those goals. You hit what their goals are. You ask them, okay, what are your goals? What would you like to see? What kind of improvement would you like to see? What kind of performance would you like to sustain? And then they list those out and they write it down. And all of this is getting documented. And then you go into that next quarter and it's the same thing. And then, like I said, if you really want to be truly great at this, you could do this, at 6 weeks, break the quarters in half, do a midpoint check-in. And you don't even, at that point, I wouldn't even do like an official writing down. I'd just like, hey, how do you feel like things are going? Are there any struggles? Are there any issues, specifically with your goals and what you set out to do in this quarter? And they say, no, I feel great, or they might have issues, and then you can address it at that point as well. It's this reactive, I told you what to do in the beginning and you should be doing it, and by the end we're going to go over it. And so you're leaving so much air of mystery and so much fog around the situation that it makes them feel less confident and less knowledgeable about how the situation is going to go, when it doesn't need to be that way. It's not in your benefit to do that. It's not in their benefit to do that. And it's most likely going to reflect in a much different evaluation, just factually, if you wait an entire year to actually do this. So you really have to hit these intermittent, quick counselings. These are not your full-on annual performance review. These can be 20, 30 minutes, a quarter. That's not a lot. I have faith and confidence in you guys that you can do this. And here's the thing. Like I said, I'm coming at this from a two-pronged approach. This is for the leadership and the management and the organization and how they want to create their workforce, but this is also for the employee. So if you're the employee out there, guess what you can do? You can ask for it. Say, hey, listen, If you weren't provided that initial counseling, like or a set of clear expectations, or if you were given expectations and you're seeing it, and you're like, I think I understand. Ask for a time to sit, like, hey, I'd like to sit down and just go over this stuff and just make sure that I have it ironed out and crisp. And so if you see anything in there that looks character trait based, then you can ask, like, would actions like this fulfill here? And what other actions would you expect to see that would actually, have my performance meet or exceed your expectations? You can ask the questions, put them on the spot if they need to be. If they're out there and they're not fulfilling their end of the bargain by being transparent in their communication, then force the issue. Bring it to them. Ask them to be clear. Ask them for those quarterly counselings. Demand it. Like, I would like to know how I'm doing. I'd like to know how you see I'm doing. And if there becomes an issue where what you are receiving from them in that quarterly time period does not match what you think is going on, that's an indicator, right? Maybe it's time maybe they're wrong and maybe you're right, and so maybe you need to document the stuff you're doing better and then bring it to them and say, hey, look, listen, like you said, I only did 8 of these events, but I hosted 12, and these are the dates and times that I did it. I don't know how it got missed. I just want to make sure that you knew everything I was tracking. But then again, maybe you're wrong and they're right. And maybe you thought you did more than you really did. And when you go back and actually look at it, like, oh my gosh, I thought I did, or I know I did, but I don't have the documentation. I'm going to make sure that I'm going to get this documented when I do these activities or perform these functions in the future. And then that way you have those with you going into the meeting. And if there continues, after you bring documentation, if there continues to be a disconnect between you and them and how the performance is going and everything, maybe it's not a right fit. Maybe it's not the right organization that you want to be a part of. I wouldn't want to work for an organization like that, but I definitely want to give the organization and my leadership and the people around me the opportunity to do right. And if they're operating in a structure that's not built that way, I can be a part of that change just by forcing the function myself in my own life. And then when that's pushed into even one leader's purview and that's being done, that gets seen and observed by more people than you can imagine. And that can end up making a really big change in an organization, starting at an individual level. And that is the way from both the management side and the talent side that we can make these workforces and places of work, places of business that much better, where everyone goes to work a little bit more excited, a little bit more clear, and everyone leaves with a little bit more satisfaction and fulfillment, because we know what the expectations are and we know when we're hitting them, and we know that when we're not hitting them, that we can reach out to our leadership and we can find a way to overcome obstacles that are in our way. I appreciate it, guys. Thank you so much for coming and spending some time with me again. This is Matthew LaStalia signing off. You guys have a wonderful week, better weekend, and I cannot wait to see you here again next week for another episode.